You are listening to the Becoming the Wealthy You podcast with Jermaine Foley. If you're a woman who makes good money in your career or business, but you're not building wealth like you want to, then you're in the right place. In this podcast, you'll learn how to stop overspending, break free from the cycle of debt, save lots of cash, and become the wealthy woman you were born to be. Let's dive in. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. So last week, we talked about how wealth building is actually simple. Because when you really break it down, all you really have to do is master what I call the 5 core areas of money. And as a reminder, here they are. The first one is income. The second one is spending. The third one is debt. The fourth one is savings. And then the fifth is investing. If you literally master those 5 core areas of money, there is no limit to the wealth you can create. So if you haven't had a chance to go back and listen to episode 177, I highly recommend that you do so after you listen to this one. Because for today, I want to talk about why even though wealth building is super simple, when you break it down the way I just did, it can actually feel incredibly hard. And I really want to talk about why that is today. Because if wealth building is really as simple as I explained, why do so many smart, capable, high-earning women still struggle with it? And the answer is this: your brain was not designed to build wealth. I'm going to say it again. Your brain was not designed to build wealth. So let me break that down for you right now. I've talked about this many times on the podcast, but your brain has different parts with different jobs. The oldest, most primitive, the simplest part of your brain is actually called the primitive brain. It was not designed for wealth building. It was actually designed for survival and survival only. And when you think about survival, that's about staying safe, staying comfortable, avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, conserving energy, staying with the group, repeating what's familiar over and over and over again. Because your primitive brain wants you to be safe. And familiar, this is a key right here, you all. Familiar to your primitive brain equals safe, even though a lot of times what's familiar isn't good for you, isn't healthy for you, it's not helping you, and it's not actually what you want. So I always like to tie that back to the fact that with money, we can find ourselves repeating the same patterns over and over and over again. And we wonder why. This is why, because your primitive brain prefers what's familiar. So it prefers familiar discomfort over unfamiliar comfort. So instead of growing, that's unfamiliar. Instead of being someone who's debt-free, that's unfamiliar. It just wants to continue to do the same things over and over again. So this is, again, why people repeat the same patterns. You pay off your debt and you run it back up again. You spend impulsively, even though you swore you were done doing that. You avoid looking at your money over and over again, even though you know what the repercussions are. You sabotage your savings, right? You spend it down. You borrow from your 401k over and over again, even again, after you said you wouldn't do it again. So your brain is pulling you back to the familiar state. So if you get to a place where you're debt-free, you don't have any credit card balances, that is unfamiliar to your brain. So it's going to do everything in your power to pull you back. If you have money saved, let's say you got a windfall, a bonus at work, or something else, a tax return or a new client, and you put that money in savings, you're like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep this money in savings. Before you know it, your primitive brain will have you spending that money down, and you'll look up and be like, okay, what happened? I had all this money and now it's just gone. It just slipped through my fingers. It disappeared. It's because your primitive brain is just trying to get you back to that comfortable, familiar place. Because again, your brain prefers familiar discomfort over unfamiliar growth. Now, this is true for most mammals, right? And when you think about animals, Just think about your puppy or your dog or animals out in the wild. They are not trying to grow. They're not trying to expand, evolve, build wealth, create goals, create anything that is more than survival. Their only job, their only care in the world is that they survive. But we're not animals, we're humans, so we're different. And when it comes to the brain, what makes us different is not only do we have this primitive brain that I just described that is responsible for our survival. And before I go on to the next part, I do want to make this part clear. Surviving is definitely necessary. You want your primitive brain to be working for you so that you can survive. So if you hear a noise in the middle of the night, right, you want your primitive brain to be on alert and create fear in your body so that you can stay safe. If something runs out in front of you while you're driving, you want your primitive brain to kick in and cause you to stop the car, right? So the primitive brain has its place. The goal, though, is that it isn't over functioning because, again, we're not living in caves anymore. We are living in a world where survival is awesome, but we also want to do something beyond survival. We want to thrive. And so that's why we humans have something in addition to the primitive brain. We have a prefrontal cortex. So your prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain responsible for planning, growth, intentionality, long-term thinking, goal setting, vision, expansion, discipline, and decision making. This is the part of your brain that says, I want to build wealth. I want to feel financially secure. I want to retire a millionaire. I want to have more than enough money. I want to get out of debt and stay out of debt. I want to have $30,000 in my high yield savings account. I want my investments to be millions and millions of dollars, which everything I just said is 100% possible for you if that's what you desire. And if you do desire those things, that's your prefrontal cortex pulling you into growth. But when you think about those two parts of your brain, the prefrontal cortex and the primitive part of your brain, you can see how you have two competing systems happening inside of you. One part of your brain wants comfort now, pleasure now, relief now, familiarity now, and the other part wants growth, wealth, freedom, peace, and long-term financial security. So, this is why, even though wealth building is simple, it can feel really, really hard because you have these two competing parts of your brain. One that wants you to stay comfortable and in the familiar state that you've always been in, spending everything you make, stuck in credit card debt, no money saved or very little saved, and investments are lackluster. And then you have that other part that's like, no, I want to be free from credit card debt. I want to have plenty of money in the bank. I don't want to live check to check anymore. I don't want to spend everything I make. I want my investments to be growing and compounding so that I can be a millionaire. And so you might be thinking, okay, Jermaine, so what do? I have these two competing parts in my head. What do I do? Well, here's the thing. You have to intentionally override your primitive brain. And one of the ways you can do that is by intentionally deciding that you're going to build wealth and that you're going to grow in the area of money management. And you can do this by setting out to master the 5 core areas of money, which again are income, spending, debt, savings, and investing. Because when you intentionally plan your spending, save money consistently, invest for the future, pay down debt and stay out of it, increase your income strategically, you are no longer operating purely from survival. You, my friend, are now operating from vision, intentionality, long-term thinking, and growth. You are no longer just reacting to life as it comes at you. You are intentionally building the life you want. You are intentionally building the financial life you want. Now, one of the best ways I think to override your primitive brain is to choose a growth area that has been a challenge for you. So if you're listening to this podcast, it's very likely that money has been a challenge for you. You're probably making really good money, but you're not keeping it. You feel like you should be further along. You feel like no matter how hard you try, Your money comes in and it goes right back out, and you are constantly wondering, like, why can't I figure this thing out? I can figure so many other areas of my life out, my career, my family, my relationships, my friendships. But when it comes to money, this is the one area I can't figure out. If that's you, this is a great growth area for you, because it's a great way for you to put your prefrontal cortex in charge and override the primitive brain so it can stop controlling this area of your life. Now, if you are someone who struggles with your weight, that may be your area, right? If you're struggling in your career, that may be your area. If you're struggling in relationships or any other area of your life, you may decide, okay, I'm going to work on that area because that's going to teach me how to override my primitive brain and let my prefrontal cortex grow me and help me to expand and thrive instead of merely survive. And so now that you know that you have those two competing parts inside of you, it's very clear on why wealth building feels so hard, even though it's really simple, right? Because wealth building requires delayed gratification, emotional regulation, intentional decisions, and consistency. And your primitive brain experiences all of these things as uncomfortable. It doesn't want to delay gratification. It doesn't want to regulate your emotions. It wants you to spend over your emotions. It wants you to indulge in retail therapy and get rid of the emotions as fast as possible. It doesn't want you to decide things ahead of time and be intentional with your decision making. It just wants you to make decisions in the moment based on what feels good, not based on what's actually good for you. And it doesn't really care about consistency. It just wants you to do what you want to do when you feel like it. Okay, so when you really think about it, saving money can feel like a loss when your primitive brain is in charge. Delayed gratification can feel like deprivation. Not buying that thing can feel really, really emotionally painful, even though logically you know better. Okay, so whenever you're ready to change something, you notice something about yourself, you're like, okay, Jermaine, I see what you're saying. I've been letting my primitive brain run the show when it comes to my money. I haven't allowed my prefrontal cortex to be in charge. And that is a beautiful thing to become aware of, because awareness, remember, is always the first step to changing anything in your life. You have to become aware of what's going on before you can change it. Because how can you change anything if you're not aware that it's there, right? And for most people, we are not consciously choosing how we handle our money. We're just going with the flow, flying by the seat of our pants, and we're letting the primitive brain just be in charge. And that's what this looks like, is you're constantly reacting. You see it, you want it, you buy it. You feel stressed, you spend money. You feel bored, you scroll on Amazon and click buy now. You feel deprived and you reward yourself. And the patterns, these habits, they just become automatic. So every time you see something that you want, you buy it. You don't think. Every time you're stressed, you're just like, listen, I'm not feeling this. Let me go indulge in retail therapy. When you're bored, instead of getting curious about that boredom, you just go shop over it. And you just do this over and over and over again until it just becomes who you are. And most of the time, these patterns really, really are driven by reasonable thoughts in your brain. Like, I deserve it. I'll start next month. One more thing won't hurt. I'll figure it out later. I had a hard day. I just need to take the edge off. I just need to feel better. I'll clean this up later. That's the primitive brain's language that keeps you in that habit loop of just surviving, okay? Because it wants that immediate relief, that immediate comfort, and that immediate pleasure. And it does not care about your future. It doesn't care that next week you're going to be feeling broke and guilty and ashamed because you did what you did this week. It doesn't care about your retirement. It doesn't care about generational wealth. It doesn't care about investing. It doesn't care about what you're going to do when you're 65, 70 years old. It doesn't care about compounding interest or anything about the future. It just cares about the here and the now. And you have to become aware of that so that you can see the reason why, even though wealth building is super simple, it feels hard for you. So now that I've really emphasized the importance of just becoming consciously aware of what's driving all of this, I want to give you some tools that you can have in your back pocket so that once you see yourself in the moment, you catch yourself in the moment, you'll know exactly what to do so that you can start reprogramming your brain, so that you can start overriding that primitive brain and letting your prefrontal cortex be in charge. So one of the most powerful things you can do is learn to recognize a spending urge. So instead of just acting on the urge, right, you get that thought like, ooh, I want this, or oh, that's so cute, or let me see what's on Amazon. Ooh, I need this, buy now. You want to interrupt that. You want to be able to notice when that's happening and start thinking, oh, that's an urge. Oh, I'm feeling bored right now and I want to shop over it. Or, oh, my brain is looking for relief. So start really trying to become aware of that. And sometimes it's hard to catch yourself in the moment, but you can start catching yourself right after it. So perfection is not the goal here. Progress is. So let's say right now you don't even catch any of this. It just keeps happening. And until now, you really weren't aware of it. But now that you've listened to this episode, you're like, oh my gosh, that's totally me. So now you can start to catch yourself either before, which is hard, and you have to sometimes build yourself up to get to that point. But you can really gain a lot of progress by catching yourself right after you do it, right? Or when you're in the moment. So let's say you have an urge, you buy something and you're like, oh my gosh, I just did it, right? Then you can start to catch it earlier and earlier. So if you slip up once or twice or even more than that, that's part of the process. So do not expect perfection from yourself. And this is the work I do with my clients all the time, helping them to allow those urges without reacting to them and catching them in advance. And it takes, sometimes more coaching tools and more somebody really helping you to notice what's going on. But I wanted to give you this here so that you can start using it as well. Because what you want to do is just create space between you and the behavior. And even if you catch yourself afterwards, you can learn from that. Like, oh, what was going on right before? I was bored and I just mindlessly started scrolling and boom, I bought something. And you can decide if you want to keep that thing that you bought, you can return it. But what's most important is that you learn from the situation so that next time you can catch it earlier. Another tool that I customize for my clients that I work with privately are protocols. Because listen, we are all humans, but we are all so very different. We all have different spending triggers, different times of day that we spend, different reasons that we spend, different emotional triggers, different environmental triggers. We are just all different, right? And so I help my clients come up with protocols that will help them based on their real life, based on what's really, really hindering them from building wealth. So protocols could look like a 24-hour pause rule, no shopping in bed, shopping your closet first, deleting shopping apps, setting spending limits ahead of time, and knowing what your triggers are so that you can plan around them ahead of time. But here's the key. I want you to know that protocols themselves are not magical. The power is knowing where to use them, where you need them, and how to practice them long enough so they just become who you are. So my mom used to always say, Jermaine, practice makes perfect, practice makes perfect. And this was when I was trying to learn how to write in cursive. And now that I'm an adult, I'm like, no, practice doesn't make perfect, but practice does make you better. And so the more you practice these protocols, it doesn't mean that you will never slip up because you're human. And that's, again, we're not going for perfection, but we are going for progress. We are going for you getting better in the area. So if you always go on huge shopping sprees before a vacation and you put a protocol in place that, hey, before I go shopping for the vacation, I have to shop my closet first, get everything out that I want to take on this vacation with me, and then decide what I need and then go buy those things. Right? That is a protocol you can put in place, but it doesn't mean you're going to be perfect at that every single time you go on vacation. Sometimes you might slip up, but that's okay. You'll notice the slip up and you can just get right back on track. But eventually, the more you practice it, it just becomes who you are. You always pull out everything you're going to wear, you see what you need, and you only buy the things that are missing. So again, the protocol itself is not magical. The power is knowing when you need one, why you need one, and how to practice it long enough so that you become better. Not perfect, but better. So really, those two tools have been huge game changers for me and my clients. Being able to Notice urges ahead of time and know how to process them through instead of constantly reacting to them. And then also setting up protocols based on your triggers, your real life, and the things that kind of are your weak spots, right? If it's vacations, if it's shopping late at night, you set up protocols or rules that you follow around those specific situations. Because when you make a commitment that you're no longer going to allow your primitive brain to run the show when it comes to your money, then that is when you have to really understand, okay, so how am I going to override all of that? That is when you decide I'm committed to building wealth. And you can do that by setting goals, right? Like, okay, I want to have this amount in the bank by this day, or I want to do this by that time. I want to be debt-free by this time. You give yourself a goal or a vision to work towards. And the way you're going to actually get there is by noticing your urges, not overspending, and putting those protocols in place. Because your prefrontal cortex, it needs something to move toward. If you don't have a goal, if you don't have anything you're working towards, then your life will just constantly look the same. You need a vision for your life. You need a vision for your finances. You need a vision for your future and the woman you want to become. Otherwise, again, your primitive brain will always choose what's familiar, and it will just keep you living that same familiar life, stuck in credit card debt, very little saved, making about the same amount of money. Or even if you do increase your income, which most people end up doing, it won't feel like it because you're spending it all. And it's just going right back out in bills because your lifestyle has inflated. And so having that vision that you're working towards, that goal that you're working towards, then when it's time to make spending decisions, you now have something to measure it against. Like, do I want to do that or do I want to do this? And then you can use the urges and protocols to help you to get there. And so to wrap things up, I'm going to say this one last time because I need you to hear me on this. The goal is not perfection. The goal is progress. Right? It's not about becoming perfect with money. It's about becoming more intentional, more aware, more emotionally regulated and resilient, and more aligned with what you want your future to look like. Because otherwise, you will not get there. You will continue to live the same life over and over again. This is why I always say money management is actually mind management, because wealth building is so much less about math and so much more about learning how to manage yourself. And this is the work that I do inside of one-on-one money coaching with my clients. We identify your patterns, your triggers, your weak spots, the thoughts that are driving you to overspend. And we also uncover your emotional habits around money so that you can stop fighting yourself and start building wealth intentionally. Remember, your primitive brain was not designed for you to build wealth. It was designed to help you to survive. And we love it for that. But we want to do more than just survive. We want to thrive. And so we need to put our prefrontal cortex in charge of our money so that we can do just that. And if you want help with that, all you have to do is go to jermainefoley.com/consult. That's Jermaine with a G, foley.com/consult to book a consultation so that we can look at where you are, where you want to go. And if I can help you to get there, I will tell you exactly how I can do that inside of one-to-one private money coaching. All right, I will see you next week. Bye-bye. Hey, if money is the one area of life you just can't seem to figure out, even though you make good money, you're not alone. That's why you're invited to book a complimentary one-to-one money consultation with me so that we can figure out how to solve your biggest money challenges. To sign up, simply go to jermainefoley.com/consult or check out the show notes. Hope to meet you soon.